3 months ago, my husband drove me to a lake house rental in the middle of nowhere and left me there with a smile on his face. I didn't make it through the front door. A woman in a gray blazer stepped out from behind a dark SUV parked at the edge of the gravel driveway, held up a badge, and said 4 words that changed everything. "Don't go inside, please." I'm incredibly grateful you're here to hear what happened next. I'm 29 years old. I work as a dental hygienist at a private practice in Portland, Oregon. I met my husband at a mutual friend's barbecue in the summer of 2018, and for a long time, I thought that afternoon was the luckiest thing that had ever happened to me. He had kind eyes, a good laugh, and the kind of confidence that made you feel safe, just standing next to him. We got married 2 years later, a small ceremony at a vineyard outside Salem. 40 guests, late September, the kind of golden light that makes everything look like a memory before it even becomes one. For a while, we were happy. Or at least I told myself we were. My parents died in December of 2021. A carbon monoxide leak in the house they'd lived in for 30 years, a faulty furnace, a slow invisible thing that took them both in the night. I was the one who found them. I was the one who called 911 and sat on the front porch in 30-degree weather until the paramedics arrived. And I remember thinking, with that specific numbness that comes after shock, that I would never feel warm again. My parents had been careful people. My father was a civil engineer. My mother taught middle school math for 22 years. They didn't live extravagantly, but they saved. They planned. When the estate settled in the spring of 2022, there was a life insurance payout and a retirement account and a paid-off house that sold fast in a seller's market. When it was all combined, the total came to just over $2 million. My husband suggested he manage it. He had his Series 65 license, he said. He understood portfolios, risk tolerance, long-term strategy. I was still in grief. I could barely get through a full day at work without excusing myself to the bathroom to cry. So I signed what he put in front of me, and I trusted him, and I didn't look at the statements he brought home because looking at numbers made me think about my parents, and thinking about my parents made me fall apart. That was my first mistake. By the fall of 2022, things between us had shifted. My husband started taking calls in the garage. He closed laptop screens when I walked into the room. He came to bed late and left early and answered fine to every question I asked about his day. I told myself it was work stress. His brokerage had restructured that year and he'd lost a few clients. I told myself couples went through phases, that this was just a phase. The credit card statements told a different story. I found the first one in January of 2023, tucked behind a stack of tax documents in his desk drawer. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for our property insurance renewal because the policy had come up for renewal and he'd asked me to file it. But that statement was there and the balance was $43,000. And the charges on it were restaurants I'd never been to, flights I'd never taken, and withdrawals from an ATM in Seattle, a city my husband had traveled to 6 times in 4 months for reasons he'd described only as client meetings. When I asked him about it, he said it was business expenses. He said reimbursement was delayed. He said I didn't need to worry about it. I asked, quietly, if I could see the investment account statements. He said he pulled them up that weekend. That weekend came and went, and he never mentioned it again. I didn't push. I don't know why I didn't push. Maybe I already knew, somewhere deep and quiet, that the number I'd see on that screen would be something I couldn't come back from. In April of 2023, he came home with flowers, not the grocery store kind, real ones from an actual florist, wrapped in brown paper. He made dinner. He opened wine. And after the dishes were done and we were sitting on the couch, he pulled a printed reservation out of his jacket pocket and slid it across the coffee table. "I booked you a weekend," he said. I looked at the paper. A lake house rental near Spirit Lake, about 2 hours east of Portland. Private property, fully furnished, access to a canoe, views of Mount Hood on clear days, 3 nights, Friday through Sunday. "Just me?" I said. "Just you." He reached over and squeezed my hand. "You've been working so hard. You haven't taken a real break since your parents died. I want you to go up there, disconnect, just breathe for a few days." I should have felt touched. Part of me did. But another part of me, the quiet part that had been paying attention even when I tried not to, noticed that his hand was cold when it covered mine, that he hadn't looked directly at me when he said it, that the reservation was in my name only, with a check-in confirmation sent to my email rather than his. "You're not coming?" I asked. "I've got the Hendricks closing Friday and a meeting with the Yamhill County Assessor on Saturday morning." He smiled. "This is for you. You deserve it." That night, I texted my best friend Jess. She'd been my closest friend since college, the person I called when my parents died, the one who sat with me in the hospital parking lot while I waited for the coroner's report. I told her about the lake house, that my husband was sending me alone for a weekend. Her reply came back in under a minute. "That's weird. Has he ever done that before?" He hadn't. The morning I left, he was different, not in a way I could have articulated to anyone at the time. Just off, too organized, too attentive to detail. He carried my bag to the car himself. He double-checked that I had the confirmation email, the gate code, the address. He asked me twice whether I had enough gas. He stood in the driveway as I backed out and watched me go with his arms crossed at his chest and a look on his face I'd never seen before. Something patient and closed, like a man who had just set a timer and was now waiting for it to run out. He called me 45 minutes into the drive. "How's the road?" he asked. "Fine," I said. "I'm fine." "Good." A pause. "The propane for the fireplace is already hooked up. The property manager said just turn the knob on the side panel of the unit." I hadn't asked about the fireplace. I hadn't mentioned being cold. It was the end of April, and the forecast for the weekend was mild, mid-60s, no rain. "Okay," I said. "Thanks." He said he loved me. The way he said it felt rehearsed. I got to the property at 11:15 in the morning. It was beautiful. I'll give him that. A cedar-sided house set back from the lake, tall pines on 3 sides, a wooden dock stretching out over still, dark water. The driveway was unpaved, gravel and packed dirt, and as I pulled in, I noticed a dark SUV parked at the far end near a bank of trees. I didn't think much of it. Short-term rentals shared access roads all the time. I had my overnight bag over my shoulder and my hand on the lockbox when I heard footsteps on the gravel behind me. "Claire Hartley?" I turned around. A woman stood about 10 feet away, late 30s, dark skin, natural hair pulled back, wearing a gray blazer over a white shirt. She was holding a badge, open-faced, and her eyes were steady and calm in a way that told me she'd done this before. "I'm Detective Sandra Okafor with the Washington County Sheriff's Department." She took one step toward me, not rushing. "Please step away from the door. I need you to come with me." My hand was still on the lockbox. "What? Why? What's wrong? Ms. Hartley?" Her voice was even, careful. "This property has been flagged as part of an active investigation. I need you to not enter that house. Are you able to come with me right now?" I just drove 2 hours. "I know." She took another step and her expression didn't change, but something in her eyes softened, just slightly. "I'm going to explain everything, but I need you away from this building first." I let go of the lockbox. I didn't know why. Something in her voice cut through the confusion and landed somewhere older and quieter, the same part of me that had been paying attention for months without letting myself admit what it was seeing. I followed her to the SUV. Her partner, a younger man named Deputy Rains, drove us to the county sheriff's substation in Corbett, a small office that smelled like burned coffee and old carpeting. Detective Okafor sat across from me at a metal table and did not ease into it. "Ms. Hartley, is your husband Marcus Hartley, date of birth June 9th, 1990? "Yes. And are you aware of any life insurance policy held in your name?" My stomach dropped. "No. We have renter's insurance and health insurance, but nothing. We never talked about life insurance." Okafor opened a folder. 6 weeks ago, we received a tip from a licensed insurance broker in Beaverton. She had been contacted by your husband about the underwriting process for a term life policy on a female spouse, early to mid-20s, in good health. She became suspicious after he asked twice about the payout timeline following an accidental death. She documented the conversation and reported it to her company's compliance department, who contacted us. My mouth was dry. He was asking about, we investigated. Last month, we pulled records from a digital insurance marketplace under your husband's email address. We found a completed application for a $1.8 million term life policy, listing you as the insured and your husband as the sole beneficiary. She slid a printed page across the table. The signature on the application is yours. I looked at it. The letters were wrong. My first name starts with a C that I've always curved to the left, a habit I picked up from my mother. The C on the page curved the other way. "That's not my signature," I said. "No," she said. "It isn't." She told me the rest carefully, piece by piece, the way you hand things to someone who might drop them. The propane fireplace at the rental house had been tampered with, a valve modified in a way that would allow gas to accumulate slowly in an enclosed space. A closed house, overnight, no windows cracked, one person asleep. It would have looked like an accident. A faulty unit, a tragic malfunction, the kind of thing that happens sometimes in rural rental properties. The property manager had discovered the modification 2 days earlier during a routine maintenance check and had immediately contacted the sheriff's department. They had been watching the property since. I sat there and felt the table under my hands and breathed. "How much of my parents' money is left?" I asked. I don't know why that was the question I asked. Maybe because it was the one I'd been most afraid to ask for 2 years. Okafor looked at me for a moment. "Based on the financial records we've pulled so far, approximately $11,000. I had nothing to say to that, so I said nothing. They asked if I'd be willing to cooperate with the investigation. An FBI agent named Derek Walsh was being brought in. Insurance fraud on a forged federal application crossed into his jurisdiction. They wanted to run a sting. They wanted my husband to believe the weekend had gone as planned. They wanted me to be dead for 72 hours. I called Jess from the substation. I was allowed to tell her I was safe, that I couldn't explain yet, and that I needed her to act normally if my husband contacted her. She didn't ask a lot of questions. She just said, "Whatever you need," and I held the phone for a second after she said it and tried not to cry. Agent Walsh arrived that evening. He was methodical, matter-of-fact, with close-cropped hair going gray at the temples, and the kind of face that had seen too many people surprised by the people they loved. He set up a laptop and a surveillance feed in the room where I was staying, a clean, spare room in the back of the substation, a cot and a folding chair and a window that looked out on a parking lot. "We've had eyes on your residence since this morning," he told me. "Audio warrant came through an hour ago. We'll hear everything." "He thinks I'm inside that house right now," I said. "Yes." Walsh looked at me. "And he's home making dinner." At 8:47 that night, a silver Honda Fit pulled into my driveway. I watched it on the feed from the exterior camera, a small grainy square in the corner of Walsh's laptop. A woman got out. She was young, mid-20s at most, with long dark hair and the careful way of moving that belongs to someone who has learned to be quiet in spaces where she might not be welcome. She didn't ring the bell. She had a key. I already knew, some part of me. I'd known for months without knowing, but watching her open my front door, watching my husband meet her in the hallway, watching him pull her into his arms and hold her the way he used to hold me, that knowing became something else, something physical. They sat in my living room, on my couch. Walsh leaned forward. "Audio's active," he said quietly. My husband's voice came through the speaker, low and steady. "By Sunday, it'll be done." The woman, Brianna, Walsh would tell me later, 26, worked at a title company in Tigard, made a sound that was almost a laugh. "And then what?" "And then we wait for the claim to process. It goes faster with an accidental death, 4 to 6 weeks usually. I've already talked to an estate attorney." "Marcus." Her voice shifted. "Are you sure? I mean, are you completely sure? I've been sure for a year." He was quiet for a moment. "She doesn't even know. She drove up there happy. She was grateful." I pressed my hand over my mouth. "And the money from before?" Brianna asked. "Her parents' money? Gone. Crypto crash in 22. But that's fine. That's why we need the policy. Between that and the house equity and whatever's left in the joint account, we're looking at close to $2.5 million. A pause. The sound of glasses being moved. I found a place in Costa Rica. Small town on the Pacific coast. I put a deposit down last month. You already put a deposit down. I was confident. Walsh made a note without looking up. What about Brianna started then stopped? What? The baby. Her voice was small. If we move to Costa Rica, I'll be 7 months along by then. I can't fly after 36 weeks. Something in the room went very still. Not the audio feed. Me. We'll go before that, he said. We'll be fine. You'll be fine. All three of us. I don't remember standing up. I remember standing up. I remember Walsh's hand on my shoulder, guiding me back down. I remember the sound of my own breathing. I know, he said. He wasn't talking to me. I didn't sleep. I sat in the folding chair and watched the camera feed cycle through angles of my own house, my kitchen, my living room, the driveway where her car was still parked at 2 in the morning. I thought about the dinner he'd made the night he gave me the reservation printout, the flowers, the way he'd said, "I love you" when I was driving away. Brianna left at 6 a.m. My husband watched her from the doorway and then went back inside and made coffee like it was any other morning. On the second day, Walsh's team traced a payment from our joint bank account, $14,000, transferred in February to an entity called Ridgecrest Consulting, LLC. The LLC was registered in Nevada, sole member a man named Brian Coulter, 41, with 2 prior fraud convictions in California and a third pending case in Arizona. What is Ridgecrest? I asked. From what we've pieced together, Walsh said, it's your husband. He opened it himself through a shell formation service. The payments were to himself, drawn out of marital assets to fund the Costa Rica deposit and the insurance application costs. He was paying himself to defraud me. Walsh didn't answer, which was its own kind of answer. On the third morning at 11:16, my husband sat at our kitchen table and called our couples counselor. I watched his face on the screen, composed and soft, the face I'd fallen in love with 7 years ago at a barbecue in July. "Dr. Messner," he said, "I have some terrible news. I lost my wife this weekend. A gas leak at a rental property. I'm still in shock. I wanted you to hear it from me." He was quiet while she responded. "Thank you," he said. "I know, I keep thinking about the last thing I said to her." He paused, let his voice break, just slightly, just enough. I told her she deserved it, a rest. She deserved a rest. I left the room. I stood in the hallway and breathed until my hands stopped shaking. Walsh came and found me. "We have what we need," he said, "enough for an arrest warrant. We're moving tomorrow morning. I want to be there," I said. He looked at me for a moment, then he nodded. We pulled into our driveway at 9:15 on a Monday morning. Walsh drove. Detective Okafor sat beside me in the back. 2 sheriff's deputies came in a separate vehicle and positioned themselves at the side entrance. The azaleas I planted along the front walkway were starting to bloom, pink and white. I'd been tending them for 3 years. Walsh knocked. 3 times measured. My husband opened the door. He looked good, rested. He'd shaved that morning. He was wearing the blue Henley I'd given him for his birthday, and when he saw Walsh's badge, his expression shifted into something practiced and mournful, a widower's face, arranged and ready. Detective. Then he saw me. Every practice thing drained out of his face at once. What was left underneath wasn't grief. It wasn't love. It was something raw and cornered and very, very afraid. Claire. The word came out wrong. Broken in the wrong place. You. "How are you?" "I didn't go inside," I said. My voice was steady. I was surprised by how steady it was. You were. "I know what you did," I said. "I know about the policy. I know about the propane valve. I know about Ridgecrest. I know about the deposit on the house in Costa Rica." I looked at him. "And I know about Brianna." His mouth opened, closed. His hand gripped the door frame. Sarah, Claire, there's more to this than Mr. Hartley. Walsh stepped forward. You're under arrest for insurance fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, and theft in the first degree. You have the right to remain silent. He didn't fight it. That surprised me most. I think I expected him to run or argue or do something that would give me a target for the anger I'd been carrying. Instead, he just stood there in the doorway of the house we'd shared for 4 years while Walsh read him his rights, and he looked at me once more. And whatever he saw in my face must have been the end of something, because he looked away and didn't look back. They led him to the car. I watched until it turned the corner. Jess was there in 20 minutes. She didn't say anything. She just hugged me long and tight, and for a moment I let myself be held. The trial began 7 months later in January at the Washington County Circuit Court. My husband's public defender, Linda Marsh, competent, overworked, mounted the only defense she could, that the propane modification had been performed by a prior guest, that the insurance application was exploratory and never intended to be activated, that the wire transfers were investment decisions made in good faith. The jury heard the recordings. They heard Walsh walk them through the Costa Rica deposit, the shell company, the forged signature with the backward C. They heard my husband's voice saying, "By Sunday, it'll be done." They heard Brianna testify that she'd known about the plan since the previous November, that she'd asked him twice whether he was going to go through with it, and that he'd said both times, "It's already in motion." Brianna had accepted a plea, accessory after the fact, 18 months in a minimum security facility. She delivered her son, a boy she named Eli, 6 weeks before she reported to begin her sentence. Eli was placed with her mother. I did not feel sorry for her. I wanted to. I tried to. I couldn't. I took the stand on January 22nd. The prosecutor, a woman named Amanda Cho, who had been doing this for 16 years, asked me to describe the drive to the lake house. She asked about the flowers, the dinner, the way my husband had watched me back down the driveway. She asked me about the phone call, 45 minutes in, about the propane fireplace I'd never asked about. When he said that, she asked, "What did you think?" I thought it was strange, I said. I thought he was being considerate. I paused. I thought I was wrong to be suspicious. Were you wrong? I looked at the jury. 7 women, 5 men. A retired nurse in the 3rd row who had been watching me with an expression I recognized. The particular attention of someone who has been in a version of this room before. Not a courtroom, but the room inside yourself, where you finally stop making excuses. "No," I said. I wasn't wrong. I just wasn't ready to be right. The jury deliberated for 4 days. On the 5th morning, the foreperson, a 60-year-old high school principal from Hillsborough, read the verdict in a voice that didn't waver. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing was 3 weeks later. I stood at the podium in that courtroom and looked at the judge and said what I needed to say. My husband tried to erase me, I told him. Not just to kill me, to erase the person I was before he got his hands on what my parents left behind. He spent 2 years making me smaller, quieter, easier to disappear. He took my parents' money and told me it was invested. He forged my name and told me I was protected. He drove me to the door of a house he planned to kill me in and told me I deserved arrest. I stopped, took a breath. I think about the word he used to use when he wanted me to stop asking questions. He'd say, "Trust me, Claire." And I did. I trusted him when I shouldn't have for a very long time. I looked at the bench. I'm not going to do that again. The judge sentenced my husband to 22 years on the attempted murder charge, 15 years on the conspiracy charge to run consecutively, and additional concurrent time for the fraud counts, eligible for parole at 69 years old. He didn't look at me when they let him out. I thought that would feel like something. A closing, maybe. It felt like a door that had been hanging open for 2 years, finally swinging shut. Not resolution exactly, just the absence of the draft. 3 weeks after sentencing, I received an email from a detective in Sacramento. His name was Robert Vance, and he worked cold cases for the Sacramento County Sheriff's Department. The subject line read, "Regarding Marcus Hartley, possible prior incident. My husband had been engaged once before. Her name was Kelsey. 24 years old, nursing student from Reading. In March of 2016, she fell from a trail on the north face of Mount Shasta while the two of them were on a weekend hiking trip. My husband had gone ahead on the trail, he said. He heard her scream. By the time he climbed back down to her, she was at the bottom of a rock face. Blunt force trauma. Ruled accidental. Kelsey's life insurance policy, $200,000, taken out 8 months before her death, paid out to my husband in full. Her sister had read an article about my trial in the Portland Tribune. She'd called Detective Vance the same afternoon. I answered his email within the hour. I said I would help in any way I could. I don't know yet what the investigation will find. I don't know if there will be another trial. I know that her name was Kelsey, and that she was 24, and that her sister spent years telling herself it was an accident, because the alternative was something she couldn't carry alone. She doesn't have to carry it alone anymore. I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in Northeast Portland in March. 4th floor, a window in the kitchen that faces east and gets good morning light. I put my mother's African violet on the sill and it's doing fine. I started seeing a therapist in February, a woman named Dr. Audrey Pham, whose office is above a used bookstore on Belmont, which means the whole building smells like old paperback novels. And for some reason that helps. We talk about the drive to the lake house, about the 45-minute phone call, about all the moments I noticed something and told myself I was wrong. She says I'm not learning to distrust people. She says I'm learning to trust myself. I think she's right. I'm still working on it. Jess comes over every Thursday. She brings food she cooks herself, which is a risk she takes on behalf of our friendship because she is not a good cook. And I eat whatever she brings, and I tell her it's wonderful because it is. In the way that things can be wonderful because it is. In the way that things can be wonderful because of who brings them, rather than what they are. Last week, she brought butternut squash soup that tasted like warm cardboard, and I told her it was the best thing I'd ever eaten, and she knew I was lying, and we both laughed until we cried. I've started writing. Not a book. Not yet. Just documents on my laptop, organized by date, trying to get the shape of things right. The way he held the flowers when he handed them to me. The backward C. The way Detective Okafor stepped out from behind that SUV with her badge up, calm and unhurried, like she already knew I was going to need a minute. I owe her my life. I told her that once over coffee in March. She looked at me steadily and said, "You drove away when something felt wrong. You were already saving yourself." I've been thinking about that a lot. My parents were careful people. They saved and planned and bought insurance because they understood that the world could change without warning, on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, in an instant you never see coming. They left me their care in the form of a number, and I let someone take it from me, because I trusted love more than instincts. I won't do that again. Not because I've stopped believing in love. I still believe in it. I believe it more honestly now. Maybe. The way you believe in things you've had to fight to keep, that you've learned to recognize even when they don't come with flowers and a lake house reservation. I believe you can love someone and still pay attention. I believe being careful isn't the same as being afraid. I believe that when a woman in a gray blazer steps out of an SUV in a gravel driveway and says your name, the bravest thing you can do is let go of the door and follow her. I'm still standing. That's the part my husband got wrong. He thought he was sending me somewhere I wouldn't come back from. He was right that I wouldn't come back from it. He was just wrong about what that meant. The woman who drove up that mountain road with a printed reservation and a weekend bag and 2 years of ignored instincts, she didn't come back. But I did, and I'm just getting started. If any part of this story felt familiar, if you've ever found yourself explaining away a cold hand, a closed laptop, a question you didn't ask because you were afraid of the answer, I want you to hear this. You're not wrong. The quiet voice that's been watching all along, the one you've been talking yourself out of, it's telling you something real. Trust it. Before you need someone to step out from behind an SUV to say it for you. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. If this story reached you, share it with someone who needs it. Subscribe to Her Silent Revenge for more, and type "standing" in the comments if you're still here, because you are. And that means everything.